Perhaps because it is my nature or has become a habit, I often think of the boys who've come here these past 30 years. Each of you has left something of yourself at camp. I hope each has taken something of camp with you on your journey through life. The other evening, long after taps, I sat on the steps of the old house and thought once more of the early years, of boys now grown to maturity, and of the changes in camp itself. I looked west to the mountains, whose calm strength and serenity so often seemed to reach out to help me in troubled moments. I thought of the succession of sunsets that seemed a rewarding conclusion to days of activity. Life at camp was extremely simple in the early years. We cooked on a 4-burner wood stove. 2 of the burners didn't work. A third was temperamental and functioned only when the wind blew from the right direction. Weeding a large cornfield and garden occupied our mornings. Baseball games, swims, and hikes in the afternoon were the precursors to instruction and construction. A sheet covering the doorway to the old kitchen served as a curtain for our evening productions. We had no councils that first year, just a bonfire on Tent Hill and the singing of popular songs. Perhaps those early seasons sound dull to the campers of today, but they were exciting for us. The adventure of creating a new type of camp was a challenge to us. We wanted a place where a boy could be judged by what he stood for, not what he could buy, and where he could learn that happiness comes from helping his fellow man. We even dared to wonder if someday we might welcome campers from distant lands, for I have always felt that geographic boundaries should not be a barrier to brotherhood. This year we had 16 boys from Asia, Europe, and Latin America, almost a third of the camp roster. 30 years ago, I formulated the objectives of camp to make clear to myself what we should try to achieve, and to make the staff and campers aware of our aims. 30 years later, I still feel no need to change them. Time and preoccupation with personal problems may have caused you to forget our objectives, so I should like to list them here. 1, to stimulate initiative and creative thought on practical problems as similar as possible to the problems which the boys will face upon maturing. To create situations and opportunities calling for responsibility and to develop a boy's self-reliance. 2, to stimulate intellectual interest by discussions with the staff and encouraging discussions amongst the boys. The great diversity of types, environments, and ambitions in our group should be conducive to wide interests. 3, to create an atmosphere in which a boy's spiritual interests can receive sympathetic understanding and therefore develop favorably. 4, to demonstrate by action a strong working philosophy of living. It need not be accepted by the boy, as no one philosophy will fit all people, but it will serve as a basis from which he can develop his own philosophy, tempered by experience and his own character. I began thinking of this talk on the front steps of the old house. Those steps have been shifted and the porch rebuilt. With so many changes of form and structure, I should imagine you must want to know if we've... The answer is no, but we have changed our methods. Change in itself is not bad. The youth of each generation face a different challenge, and I hope that the camp will always be flexible enough to meet it. I think you will also want to know if the profound feeling for Rising Sun itself has changed, if the dreams and the values of the early years are still meaningful. Here is an answer to that question from the campers of 1959.
A group of us 59 campers did a lot of digging in old camp papers and asked alumni lots of questions this summer to find out how camp came to be the place we know and love now. We didn't find out if you had the record player going when the first scraping and finishing job was done on the walls of the old house back in the early 30s. But the job came due again this year, and this is how it sounds. In the report that follows, we will try to trace camp's development and tell you about Rising Sun in '59. You'll hear the voices of this year's campers from many countries, including the Bronx, where I am a sophomore at the High School of Music and Art. My name is Mike Sherman, and I'd like to tell you first of all what camp looks like today. Timber! When campers in the mid-30s spent construction and winter weekends planting the pine forest, I guess they never expected to hear that sound. One of the trees, now giants, being cut down. The forest grew so dense that it needed to be thinned out. And right in the midst of it went up an Adirondack shelter this summer, one of our big projects. It's near the fire clearing, where we have late talks between campers and staff and among ourselves. As you cross the road, still unpaved, you're in right field. We're putting up a new backstop and 100 feet of high chicken wire along the slope down to the big field. This is to keep the third baseman and left fielder out of the nettles and poison ivy. Beyond the softball field, our soccer field. And near the Willie house, the volleyball court. The barn is still there, but sags a bit. As every visiting alumnus tells us, when he was a camper, there was no hot water in the Willie house. We have to blush a little and admit that we even have a washing machine, too. O tempora, o mores. Beyond the barn, the bark-thatched outdoor workshop is cluttered and busy. And busier still is the workshop in the new house, a vaguely Japanese building, just opened this year on the site of the old nature lodge. It's a big one-storied house with sloping roof, workshop on one side and nature museum on the other. Sandwiched in between is the new press room. Without names on the walls, it doesn't look very much like a press room yet. Back across the road, the front lawn, weeded by generations of Freudian campers as they talked under the tall locust trees, has changed very little. But over near the tennis court, where star-studded rock used to be, you'll see the most striking alteration of camp's outward aspect, the new house of modern brick, glass, and wood. High picture windows look out over the big fields from the new camper's room of warm, dark wood. All our productions, except the big one in July, are given on the stage of the campus room. And for arena-style shows, we sit on the stage and watch the actors below. The counselors and the camp director have their rooms too. And Freddie's big HP 93 is garaged below, next to the darkroom. A quick look at the original house, where the mess hall has spread out to confiscate part of the side lawn and doubled in size. The sachem of the day has nothing to do at dawn in the new gas kitchen. His old job of lighting the wood-burning stove is a memory, just like the woodshed, which none of us has ever seen. Tent Hill is crowded with 12 tents instead of the original 5. The Dark Horse Trail banister Camp's oldest continuing project is still unbuilt, though work goes on. And in the same category of projects that can't get done is the banister on the trail to the Sawkill. We're expanding the terraces as loges for the outdoor theater, but have no plans to change Louise Falls. It was a perfect spot in 1930 for thinking, talking, and dreaming, and the passing seasons have wrought no change here.
The former grist mill and blanket factory that is now our outdoor theater on the Sawkill has changed only slightly in appearance since the first production there, Arms and the Man, in 1940. A framework of iron piping went up this year as part of the new stage lighting system, first used to illuminate our production of HMS Pinafore.
The Joseph's fog is seen, and its crowd of rushing beauty, we hope you'll find us clean, attentive to our duty. We sail the ocean blue, and saucy ships of beauty. We're sober, sober men and true, attentive to our duty. Sober, sober men and true.
Our performance of the Pinafore was subjected to the traditional hazards of an outdoor production. As on many similar occasions in the past, the cast spent most of the day of the play gazing at the sky, studying the movement of the clouds, and worrying about the possibility of rain. The insect life presents a major threat to the powers of concentration of the audience. It takes some 30 campers, amidst shouts announcing gunched fingers and toes, to transport the piano down to the stage. And of course, everyone at camp participates in the noisy, chair-lugging chain gang. Incidentally, my name is Jerry McIntyre. I'm from Fort Hamilton, Brooklyn. The substance of the productions has changed considerably since the early years of camp. The shows of the 1930s were combinations of skits, one-act plays, and musical renditions. They were often highlighted by the Seneca Indian songs and dances of Roland Sundown. The first full-length play performed at camp was the 1937 production of Pinafore. For the past 10 years now, the annual July production has been the offering of a single full-length work. The most popular type of show has been the musical satire of Gilbert and Sullivan. Campers have hidden behind Japanese fans 3 times for performances of the Mikado. The Pirates of Penzance have twice crept stealthily across the Rising Sun stage. And this year's production was the 3rd launching of the HMS Pinafore. The 1952 presentation of Melville's Billy Budd suggested a somewhat different version of naval life. Shakespeare has made several appearances in the Rising Sun repertoire. The Comedy of Errors was performed in 1938, The Taming of the Shrew in 1939, and in 1950, everyone at camp donned rosa. The shows have become more elaborate since the first use of backdrop and curtain in the barn in 1933 and 1934. The gondoliers of 1953 made their entrance in a canoe, while the audience watched from the embankment of the Sawkill. Half the action of this year's show took place on an elevated poop deck in the shadow of an enormous rigged mast. With the growth of the number of boys from other countries at camp, the cast of the shows has taken on an increasingly multilingual flavor. This year, Luvahan Byaman from the Netherlands gave a portrayal of the captain of the Pinafore, which was very spirited and very Dutch.
Not arrange or reprobation to any register. I tried to speak with moderation, but you have gone too far. I'm very sorry to disparage a humble form as that. But to seek your captain's stealthy marriage, why, that's too bad.
The production this year, as in the past, involved a vast community effort. It left us with a feeling of excitement and satisfaction, a feeling which, I suspect, is shared by all those, right from the beginning, who have sold the tickets, painted the flats, and trod the boards at Rising Sun.
The big play in July is not the only time in the season the lights and grease paint are brought out. Rising Suns have always had the urge to act, declaim, clown, and emote. Way back when, Cuckoo Kitchen, Bug Palace or Skeeter's Ark used to put on short, homemade, often hilarious skits in the mess hall. Later on, plays moved to the barn. The curtain and the lights created a real theatrical atmosphere. A favorite then were the blackouts, in which the action was pantomime, in silhouette, behind a sheet. One of the favorites was a surgical operation, in which everything from a hacksaw to a plumber's friend were removed from the patient. We haven't had any blackouts at camp in many years, but pantomime is still with us. This year, Andreas Santis from Greece presented some scenes from the Odyssey. He read a simplified version while the action proceeded on the stage. Radio programs were developed after the war as a practical way of putting on longer shows. The parts could be read from a script, and the sets could be as grand as the listener's imagination. Campers, huddled together in the handicrafts room, spoke the parts of plays like McLeish's The Fall of the City and of O'Neill's Emperor Jones.
There. I gets rid of them frippity emperor trappings, and I travels lighter. Lord, I'm tired. Oh, I'm sorry. It's sure hard to shake.
In 1948, regular program directors were appointed every week at council to produce radio programs in a week's time. Programs again were broadcast from the handicrafts room to the mess hall. But the campers felt restricted by having only these disembodied voices. To prepare theatrical productions for performance with sets and without scripts, the program directors were then appointed for 2 weeks, and this has been the practice this year too. Your narrator on this production has been Anilkamani Jayasurya from Ceylon.
Baby, good pitch, Wayne.
Inside. 2-0.
That away, Marty. Look at him, Marty. Walks as good as a hit. That away! Hey! Hello! Come on, Jack! Go on in! Come on in! Nice. Way to go!
That rally you just heard exploded in the third inning of another hard-fought game against our old menaces, the local Red Hook team. We dropped that squeaker by a score of 12-10. Unfortunately, this hasn't been one of our best seasons on the diamond across the road. We've had the old problem of whipping a team into shape, even though most of the fellows on it had never played together before. But we held our own. In July, at least, we beat the staff 9-8. My name is Mike Hart, and I'm from Jackson, Mississippi. I played third and shortstop and spent a lot of time chasing the ball down the slope that leads to the big field. We've been playing a lot of soccer in '59, a game that has been sort of in and out over the years since it was brought to camp back in '31. Of course, most of the campers who call soccer football, the boys from abroad, seem to stick to it rather than to try to figure out balls and strikes and the infield fly rule. Rain clouds hung over the track and field meet we wanted to run 3 or 4 different times this summer. This was a shame because this event was a great success these last 3 years. In a way, I guess, these CRS Olympics are a pale-face imitation of the old Zuni Wildcat battles in the early days of camp. Then the whole camper group was split into 2 warring camps whose bitter competition spread to practically everything that went on in camp. For our Olympics, it's a game. This has been a real scorcher. It's been a lot easier for ordinary campers, that is, those not taking life-saving instruction, to get into those icy waters of the Saltire. The long-standing rule that every swimmer has to take a stone out of the swimming hole when he leaves has made it wider and deeper than in the early days. The dock is on steel girders, and the old question of a diving board is still up in the air. Something new that was added last year were the 2 turning boards, one of them near the bridge and the other at the opposite end of the swimming area. They mark off 25 yards for races and distance swimming and are also the water polo goals. Campers still gunch each other in the dark, playing capture the flag in the big field or on the front lawn. And the tennis court the campers built in the 30s is still weeded, rolled, and used regularly. The boys from abroad have brought many of the games that are popular in their home countries with them to camp. Over the years, campers have played an English game called crocker, volleyball, badminton, and even had a try at the kind of vertical pitch baseball they call pesäpallo in Finland. In 1955, M.G. Rashid from East Pakistan taught the camp cricket. The whole idea of campers instructing other campers has had a big boost during recent years. Listen to Tamal Khan, one of the 59 campers, giving instruction in the building of a telescope.
Now, in the construction of a diagonal holder for a telescope, you first have to have a mirror, either a square mirror or an elliptical mirror or a prism. And this is mounted at a 45-degree angle in the tube.